Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Performapal Yugioh deck profile for post the July 2021 ban list. With the release of the latest ban list, we got Performapal Skullcrobat Joker off of the list. I was, ready to do a Performapal deck update depending on whatever we got off the list, whether it would have been Skullcrobat or Monkey Board. I would have been ready for a deck update. Definitely excited because this searcher definitely provided a lot of power to the deck, just being able to search out a good number of cards that help the overall engine of the Performapal deck, which is to perform a Pendulum Summon on a bunch of different monsters we have in the deck, and then with all the different extra deck options, go into a Synchro, Fusion, Xyz, you name it, powered with Odd Eyes. This is a definite fun deck at that, and we only have the one Skullcrobat in, for the latest ban list update, but still better than nothing with running this deck. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So for the Performapal Monsters, fresh off the ban list, like I said, we're running one Performapal Skullcrobat Joker. You cannot Pendulum Summon monsters except for Performapal Monsters, Magician, Pendulum Monsters, and Odd Eyes Monster. This effect cannot be negated, but you mostly use Skullcrobat Joker for its monster effect. When it's normal summon, you can add one Performapal Monster, Magician, Pendulum Monster, or Odd Eyes Monster from your deck to your hand, except for Performapal Skullcrobat Joker. You have all the search options available to you, giving you whatever you need, whether it be your other pendulum scale you need for the adjusting scales, or even just a boss monster to go into, even being able to search out our Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon, which we also run in the deck because it's definitely a boss monster to use, paired up with all the different Performapal monsters. For some of the other higher number Performapal monsters we're running in the deck, for the Pendulum Monsters, running 3 Performapal Pendulum Sorcerer. This card's always been a great backup to Skullcrobat Joker, and the fact that we can search it in the deck that much more quickly makes it a great powerhouse when it's in the pendulum scale, being able to boost all the Performapal monsters with 1000 attack until the end of the turn when you perform a pendulum monster summon, and with those Performapal monsters. But you mostly use it when it's special summon. You can target up to 2 cards you control, destroy them, and if you do, add Performapal monsters with different names from your deck to your hand, except for Pendulum Sorcerer, equal to the number of monsters destroyed or cards destroyed with the new updated version of this card. So you can even search out Skullcrobat with this. If you go for a pendulum summon first and you added this card to your hand, you can then use your Skullcrobat Joker for the search of the normal summon, giving you more and more cards to use in your hand for those resources, and even being able to set up your pendulum scales again with the newer cards that you may have destroyed with Pendulum Sorcerer, giving you plenty of options because you can search out plenty of the different Odd Eyes based pendulum monsters also. I also run 2 Performapal Odd Eyes Minotaurus. With this card, if you Performapal or Odd Eyes monster attacks a defense monster and inflicts piercing battle damage to your opponent, or during damage calc, if your Pendulum monster attacks an opponent's monster, you can make that opponent's monster lose 100 attack for each Performapal and Odd Eyes card you control during damage calculation only. So a good backup for just additional power on the field, but being able to be searchable with Skullcrobat or Sky Iris, since it has Odd Eyes in the name, is a great addition to the deck, and the fact that it's a level 4 Dark Attribute monster means that we can use it for either some of our fusion plays or even for setting up some of our XYZ plays, being the level 4 monster. For more pendulum scale setup, I also run 2 Performapal Lizard Draw. This just gives us draw power, setting up more cards in the extra deck for us as well, but mostly for the option of if you have a Performapal card in your other pendulum zone except Lizard Draw, you can destroy this card if you do draw 1 card. Being able to search this card out again just gives us more of a deck thinning option, and then drawing into more cards that we can use for plenty of our plays in the deck. I also run 2 Performapal Yugioh Golem. If this once per turn during the main phase, if this card was Pendulum Summon this turn, you can Fusion Summon 1 Fusion monster from your extra deck that uses this card and a Dragon type monster you control as fusion material. So our main go-to cards that we can rely on for these monsters is Performapal Gatling Ghoul and Performapal Odd Eyes Metal Claw, needing both a Performapal monster and an Odd Eyes monster, or a level 5 or higher Dark monster, which is also Odd Eyes. So being able to use Yugioh Golem with Odd Eyes to go into those fusions just by Pendulum Summoning this card out makes it a big play there. But just like with Lizard Draw and Minotaurus, I'm only running 2 of each. You can search out these cards with your Pendulum Sorcerer or even just Skullcrobat, so you really don't need more than 3 of copies, because you don't really want to see the same numbers, because not only will they have the same pendulum scales, they just won't give you enough benefits for a lot of your different plays you can do. I also run 2 Performapal Celestial Magician. This could be a potential 3 in the deck. I like it for the high scale that it has, but being able to be searched with Skullcrobat, I'm going to be saying that a lot in this video, and the fact that you get different benefits points with this card. When you would normal summon or special summon this turn, you can only apply the following effects for the rest of this turn based on the monster that you currently control with this card. Whether it be a fusion, synchro, exceeds, you have plenty of different options available to you, even with Pendulum with this card, and all the different power it can provide for those cards on the field as well. For some of the OneOffs, which you run a pretty good number of OneOffs, just for the fact that they can be searched out pretty easily in the deck as well. I run one Performapal Daggerman. This could be more if you wanted to run Brave Eyes Pendulum Dragon, because it does need a warrior monster. If you don't want to run Brave Eyes, you can always take out the Daggerman and put in a third copy of Performapal Celestial Magician into the deck. I run the one Performapal Get Turtle. This one is great with Lizard Draw, giving you the additional draw option. If a Performapal is activated in your other Pendulum zone, being able to draw one card and then destroy Lizard Draw. It's just a 2 of draw and great search options with your Pendulum Sorcerer there. And also the one Performapal Odd Eyes Synchron. This is the tuner, giving you the option to special summon a bunch of different monsters from your Pendulum scale onto the field. It's why I also like running the Daggerman. Being a level 5, you can set up in the scale, summoning out your Odd Eyes Synchron, summoning it onto the field, and then going for a level 7 Synchro with those two monsters immediately after you summon it. I also run one Performapal Odd Eyes Dissolver, another fusion option, and the fact that it's an Odd Eyes card makes it searchable with Sky Iris. One Performapal Odd Eyes Unicorn for the high scale search for an Odd Eyes card, giving it so we have plenty of low scales in the deck, but just more resources to use for the high scale, along with Performapal card Gardna. This card also provides great defense since it gains defense equal to the combined original defense of all other Performapal monsters you control. So setting this card up as a Pendulum summon, it makes so your opponent has to basically get rid of all your other Performapal monsters before they can get rid of this card on the field. And then as for the non-Pendulum Performapal monsters, still like running the 3 Performapal Second Donkey backed up with Skullcrabat. This card is a great searcher. When it's normal or special summon, you can send one Performapal monster from your deck to the graveyard, except for Second Donkey. If you have 2 cards in your Pendulum zone, you can add to your hand instead. So you should always at least have the Pendulum zone set up with this card, because then instead of just sending it to the graveyard, you'll have your search ready to go. So very, very useful for that. And the fact that it's not a once per turn means as you have 2 of these cards in your hand, you can set up your Pendulum scale, summon both these cards out, and get 2 additional searches to your hand, with ideally the same setup being you can add Skullcrabat if you haven't performed your normal summon yet, just like with Pendulum Sorcerer, normal summoning it and giving you the additional search to your hand for you to use. And then for the rest of the monsters in the main deck, 3 Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon. Like I said, it's just a boss monster. It works so well with a bunch of different cards in the deck, being able to add it even with Performapal Skullcrabat Choker, or even just set it up with plenty of your search for your different Odd Eyes monster, and being the fusion requirement for Yugioh Golem for going into a good number of our fusion monsters makes it a different 3 of. Also for the fact that it can inflict double battle damage to your opponent when it battles an opponent's monster, and search out any of your other Pendulum monsters with 1500 or less attack by destroying it in your Pendulum scale at the end of the turn. And that is it for the monsters. We'll now move on to the spells. One of the best spells in the deck is Performapal Popper Up. You send up to 3 cards from your hand to the graveyard to draw that many cards. Then you can special summon that many monsters from your hand with different names that are Performapal, Magician Pendulum, and or Odd Eyes monsters, each with a level between the Pendulum scales of 2 cards in your Pendulum zone. If you do not special summon by this effect, you lose 1,000 life points for each card in your hand, and you can only activate 1 Performapal Popper Up per turn. So you should always at least have the scales set up when using this card in the deck, so you don't take too much damage, but being able to use it for basically a second Pendulum summon, because you'll special summon those monsters between the scales as long as you have your preferred scales set up, which would be 1 and 8, being able to then draw into the good majority of what we run in the deck and then summon out those cards onto the field for the additional plays you can use. I also run 2 Performance Hurricane. You target cards your opponent controls up to the number of Performapal monsters you control, return them to the hand. You can activate 1 Performance Hurricane per turn, but it returns them to the hand. So if your opponent has plenty of extra deck cards, you can bounce those cards back to the extra deck, giving you a minus for your opponent and the cards they can use. All you have to do is have a Performapal monster. So even if your opponent has, let's say, a boss monster on the field, you just need to summon out 1 Performapal monster, activate this card, and then that monster's gone on the field, not even needing any of the Pendulum scales. I also run 2 Spiral Flame Strike if you control an Odd Eyes card, which we do run plenty of Odd Eyes cards in the deck. So just being able to control this card means we can search out and add to our hand an Odd Eyes monster from our deck or face up in the extra deck. So just being able to search out one of our main go-to boss monsters for the Performapal deck is a big plus there. Or even if you control Odd Eyes, just destroy a card on the field. I wanted to stick to as much as I could for the Pendulum Performapal purity of the deck, but still having Spiral Flame Strike adds a little bit more power in the deck that definitely needs for either getting over some of my opponent's cards or just setting up my own plays. And I also run 2 Sky Iris. I spoke about this card earlier in the video. It's just your searcher for anything odd eyes and also protecting since they can't be targeted by your opponent's card effects in the Pendulum scale. I also run the 1 Terraforming. I really feel you only need 2 Sky Iris because running 3, if you open up multiples of this card, it really can't do you much else aside from the fact that if your opponent destroys one, being able to reactivate it again. So having the 2 and the 1 Terraforming can at least thin out the deck a little more, giving you better draws for when you use your Lizard draw and your Git Turtle as well. And for more search power, I also run 2 Duelist Alliance. If there is a card in the Pendulum zone, you add 1 Pendulum Monster or a Pendulum Spell and Trap from your hand to your hand. You can activate 1 Duelist Alliance per turn. So you can add Odd Eyes Pendulum Dragon, but my big search with this card is Performapal Pendulum Sorcerer, since it has Pendulum in its name, and being the ideal card that I want to summon out with my Pendulum Summon. For more fusion options, I also run 1 Odd Eyes Fusion and the 2 Fusion Substitutes. The Fusion Substitutes just give me more draw power because I do like to use resources I have on the field for it, but then being able to banish this card from my graveyard, then target 1 Fusion Monster in my graveyard, returning it to the extra deck to draw 1 card. It works best when I use it with Second Donkey or if I just have more of the setup in the graveyard for the play to go into. And the Odd Eyes Fusion really comes in handy when I can use my extra deck resources against my opponent as well. Lastly, for the main deck, just the 1 Bubble Barrier. This is protection for my Performapals on the field. Not being able to take damage against my opponent is a big plus as well, using this card. If you wanted to run additional copies of this, you can always take out the numbers of Spiral Flame Strike, but I see more consistency with this card and then just the 1 Bubble Barrier, or like I said, no damage, and all it really does is provide protection against my opponent when I have some of my weaker Performapal monsters on the field and not much to use them for. And that is it for the main deck. We'll now move on to the extra deck for the fusion monsters. I run 1 Performapal Gatling Ghoul and 1 Performapal Odd Eyes Metal Claw. Odd Eyes Metal Claw is definitely one of the best ones in the deck. It cannot be used as fusion material if this card was fusion summoned with polymerization. It is unaffected by other cards' effects, and when this card declares an attack, all monsters you currently control gain 300 attack to the end of the battle phase. So that's why I like to run the fusion substitute. It's always treated as polymerization. So when I make this Metal Claw, I have the boss monster on the field ready to go. You just need an Odd Eyes monster and a Performapal monster, and Gatling Ghoul is more for the destruction power that it has against my opponent and being able to inflict damage against them using it. I also run the 1 Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, another boss monster, and we do run a good amount of Dark Attribute monsters to use, and when you summon them onto the field for this card, makes for the perfect setup since they have to be monsters on the field to use with Fusion Substitute. And lastly, the 1 Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon for the Odd Eyes Fusion play when I open up the spell to go into this card. For the Synchro monsters, I run 1 Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon, 1 F.A. Dawn Dragster as well. If you want to run Clear Wing Synchro Dragon, you can take out the F.A. Dawn Dragster for that level 7 option, but the Meteor Burst can give me more special summons from the Pendulum Zone. If I have Odd Eyes set there, I can special summon onto the field and then overlay them into my Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon. I run 1 Odd Eyes Absolute, 1 Dark Rebellion Xyz Dragon, and the 1 Magister Paladin, the Ascending Draco Slayer for the different Xyz, especially with Magister Paladin being able to add a Pendulum monster to my hand makes it all the better just to easily search out a Skullcrabat just using 2 level 4 Pendulum monsters. Absolute Dragon can give me another summon going into Vortex if I use Meteor Burst for its overlay, and then when it would be sent to the graveyard, which you can even send it for your Link monsters. For the Link monsters, I run 1 Cross Sheep. You have so many different extra deck summonings in this deck, making Cross Sheep very, very vital for that play setup. 1 Nightmare Phoenix for additional destruction against my opponent. Barricade Board Blocker with Bubble Barrier, Sky Iris, you name it. The recycle power with this card is very, very handy. 1 Zephyra Metaltron for more of the Pendulum extra deck setup. 1 Avramax, same concept with this card, and 1 Boral Sword Dragon to finish off the higher Link monster power in the deck altogether. And then as for the go-to plays, like I said, one of the biggest ones can rely on your Skullcrabat Joker. So if you summon out this card and go for the search, it all depends on what other Performapal monster you open up with in your hand. If you want to add the Pendulum Sorcerer, knowing you already have your other scales ready to go. If you have 2 Pendulum scales with varying scales that you can at least summon out your Pendulum Sorcerer onto the field, you can then Pendulum Summon, and summoning out your Pendulum Sorcerer, then target the 2 scales you have, destroying them, giving you the additional search. If you have any other Performapal monsters, you can then search out the other 2 additional Performapals to use into your hand. You can set up, I would ideally search out Git Turtle and your Lizard Draw, because then you'd activate Git Turtle, set the Lizard Draw, giving you the additional draw off of your card. If it's a card that you can rely on for fusion, that's an added bonus there. If it's one for synchro, more and more power for the draws that you can use. But then also you get the 2 draws, because then you can destroy Lizard Draw for that additional draw in your hand. Having the scale 6 means you hopefully want to hit a lower scale card to use, but even if you draw into cards like Odd Eyes, you can set the Odd Eyes in the zone and then destroy at the end phase for additional search, while also using the 2 monsters you still have on the field to go into plenty of extra deck plays, whether you want to search out for more Pendulum Monsters, go for more of a boss monster hit against your opponent. All of this is available for you to use. If you go for more of the synchro route and you have your Odd Eye Synchron on the field, and let's say you have the Dagger Man, which could have been an additional search from this card as well, set up in the Pendulum scale, you can then summon out your Odd Eye Synchron onto the field, making use of it. It doesn't even have to be Dagger Man. If it can be Gum Bubble Monster as well, Gum Mutton, and then summoning it onto the field. If you have this card set up and Odd Eyes in your Pendulum scale, it just makes that better, because then you can use the 2 for the synchro summon of your Odd Eyes Meteor Burst. When this card is special summon, target a card in your Pendulum zone, which could be Odd Eyes, summoning it to the field, and then using the 2 monsters that you have to then go into your Odd Eyes Absolute Dragon. And then from there, you can go for the fusion of your Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon, going into all the different extra deck monsters to rely on that play using your Performapal synchro plays. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed. I always love updating the Performapals, and the fact that we have Skullcrobat back into the deck makes it all the better for just the powerhouse we have, and hopefully maybe we'll see some other Performapals or even some additional numbers for Skullcrobat coming off the list later on in future ban lists. But until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.